Hey, happy Tuesday, bullfrogs. All right, so yesterday we started our new book, High Tide in Hawaii. We got all the way to chapter 4. So today we're going to start with chapter 4 called Garden Paradise. All right, here we go. Jack heard pounding noises. He imagined Baka and Kama were building a ship. He opened his eyes. Only he and Annie were still in the hut. A piece of cloth covered the doorway. Jack sat up and shook Annie. "Wake up," he said. She opened her eyes. "I think they're building a ship outside," said Jack. "Come on, let's go." Annie jumped up. "Don't forget your lei," she said. They put on their flower wreaths. Jack lifted the cloth over the doorway, and they stepped out into the warm sunlight. Baka and Kama and their parents smiled at Jack and Annie. They were all working, but no one was building a ship. Baka was pounding a wide strip of bark with a wooden club. Kama was using a stone to pound something that looked like a fat sweet potato. Their parents were weaving grass mats. "What are you making?" Jack asked. "I'm making tapa," said Baka. "First, I beat the bark of the mulberry tree into thin sheets. Then, my father pastes the sheets together to make cloth for us. This is the root of a taro plant," said Kama. She pointed at the squashed white vegetable. "When you add fruit to it, you get poi." "Great," said Jack. "By the way, do you ever build ships?" "Ships?" asked Baka. "What for?" There's a picture of their family doing all their meal prepping together. Jack shrugged. "To sail away?" he said. "Why would we want to do that?" asked Kama. "Good question," said Jack, smiling. "Can I help?" Annie asked Kama. "Sure," said Kama. While she showed Annie how to pound the taro root, Jack slipped back into the hut. He pulled out his notebook and quickly added to his Hawaii list. Tapa is bark pounded into cloth. The taro root is pounded for poi. Ship? ? Jack heard Kama ask her parents if they could play now. "We've finished our chores," said Kama. "May we take Jack and Annie to the ocean?" "For wave riding?" said Baka. Jack held his breath. He half hoped their parents would say no. "Yes, go have a good time with your friends," said their father. "Come on, Jack," Annie called. Jack put his notebook away. He pulled on his pack and joined the others outside. "We'll be back in a little while," said Kama. "Don't forget to eat breakfast," said her mother. "We won't," said Kama. "Where will we get breakfast?" wondered Jack. He and Annie followed Kama and Baka. They passed villagers hard at work. Some carried firewood or water. Others were cutting grass or stripping bark from trees. Everyone smiled and waved. "Hungry?" Kama asked Jack and Annie. "Sure," they said. Kama and Baka went into the grove of palms near the huts. They climbed up 2 slanting tree trunks, using their hands and feet to push themselves up. At the top, they shook the palm leaves. "Watch out!" Kama shouted. Jack and Annie jumped back as big, round coconuts fell to the ground. Kama and Baka slid down the trees. They each picked up a coconut. Then they found rocks and began to whack the hard shells. They whacked and whacked until their coconuts cracked into halves. Kama shared hers with Annie. Baka shared his with Jack. Jack drank the fresh, sweet milk inside the coconut. He said. Interesting, asked Baka. "No, means good," said Jack. Everyone laughed. Then Kama picked bananas off a banana tree and gave them to Jack and Annie. Jack peeled his and took a bite. It was the best banana he'd ever eaten. When breakfast was over, they all headed into the flowery meadow. The sky was the bluest blue Jack had ever seen. The grass was the greenest green. The flowers and birds sparkled like jewels. Hawaii is like a garden paradise, Jack thought. He wanted to look up Hawaiian birds and flowers in the research book. As the others kept walking, he stopped and pulled out the book. Jack, come look, Annie shouted. She was standing at the edge of a cliff with Baca and Kama. Jack put away the book and hurried to join the others. He looked down at a beach 50 feet below. There were no people. Only seashells and seaweed lay on the glistening white sand. Big foamy waves crashed against the shore. Wow, said Annie. Uh-oh, thought Jack. Okay, chapter 5 is called Go with an exclamation mark. Baca looked at Jack and grinned. Ready? He asked. I'm ready, said Annie. Where do we get our surfboards? Down there, said Kama. She pointed to a rocky path that led to the beach. Let's go, said Annie. Annie, Baca, and Kama started down the path. Jack followed, moving slowly and carefully. When he stepped onto the beach, Jack slipped off his shoes. He dug his toes into the dry, warm sand. It felt as soft as silk. Actually, I wouldn't mind just taking a walk on the beach, he said to the others. But no one seemed to hear. They had all walked over to a row of wooden surfboards propped against the rocks. Baca picked out a long board and lugged it over to Jack. For you, he said. Jack took the board and looked up at it. It was as tall as his dad. Isn't this a little big for me? He asked. Baca shook his head. He chose a board for Annie. Then he and Kama grabbed a couple for themselves. And here's a picture. You can see how long the boards are right here. See how tall this one is compared to Jack? Jack took a deep breath. I'd like to read a little about surfing first, he said. He put his board down and pulled out the research book. What is that? Asked Kama. It's a book, said Jack. It tells you about things. How does it talk? Said Kama. It doesn't talk, said Annie. You read it. Kama looked confused. Jack forgot the book. Jack, forget the book now, Annie said. Let's just do what Baca and Kama tell us. She headed for the ocean, lugging her board. Jack sighed and put the book away. He left his pack in the sand, picked up his board, and followed the others. They all stopped at the edge of the water. First, we need to get past the breaking waves, said Kama. Then we'll show you what to do next. Together, they waded into the cool, shallow water. The waves don't seem all that big, Jack thought hopefully. But as he waded deeper into the ocean, the breaking waves began to look bigger and bigger. When the first wave hit him, Jack leaned against it, lifting his board. He nearly fell over. Kama, Baca, and Annie moved farther out into the ocean. Jack watched as a wave loomed over them. They all threw their boards over the wave and dove into it. Jack struggled forward. The next time a big wave came toward him, he threw his board over it. Holding his glasses tightly, he ducked under. When Jack stood up again, he wiped the water from his eyes and glasses. His surfboard was close by. He grabbed it before another wave came. Jack kept fighting his way forward. By the time he got past all the breakers, the water was up to his chest. We'll paddle out to catch a big wave, said Baca. Jack frowned. But don't worry, Jack, said Kama. It will be fun. Baca and Kama pulled themselves onto their boards. They lay on their bellies and began paddling with their hands out to sea. Jack and Annie lay down on their boards, too, paddling over the gentle waves. Jack relaxed. Now this was something he could do all day. When I say go, paddle fast back toward the shore, said Kama. When do we stand up? Said Annie. When you start toward the shore, said Baca. Stand up with one foot forward. Stretch out your arms to keep your balance, but don't try to stand up the very first time, said Kama. Just ride your board on your belly. I see one coming now, said Baca. Wait, said Jack. Everything was happening too fast. He had questions. Go, Kama shouted. Jack saw a big wave rolling toward them. Before he knew it, Baca, Kama, and Annie were paddling quickly toward the shore. Jack paddled like crazy to keep up. Suddenly, the wave lifted him and swept him forward. Jack zoomed toward the shore with amazing speed. Out of the corner of his eyes, he saw Baka and Kama and Annie all stand up. Do you think Jack's going to stand up? What do you think is going to happen? So they're all three standing up. Jack's still on his stomach. Let's see. Jack wanted to be like them. In a flash, he went up on his knees. He put his left foot forward and stood up. For 1 second, he felt like a soaring bird. Then he lost his balance. Jack fell into the water, grabbing his glasses just in time. The waves crashed down on top of him. Water filled his mouth and went up his nose. His board and his leg were swept away. Jack twisted and turned in the churning water. When his head bobbed up above the water, he choked and coughed. Another big wave crashed down on him, and he went under again. When he came up, he plunged forward, desperately trying to get to the shore. Again and again, Jack was thrown down and slammed by breaking waves. But each time he got up and hurled himself closer to shore, Finally, Jack dragged himself out of the ocean, feeling bruised and battered. He fell onto the sand. Whew. That sounds really scary. Have you ever tried to go surfing before? I bet it would not be easy. All right, so tomorrow we will meet again here, and I will begin with chapter 6 called Shake Up. Chapter 6. All right, thank you for reading with me today. I hope that you're reading and working hard at home and enjoying some of this nicer weather before all the rain comes. So I'll talk to y'all soon. Bye.